Take a deep breath in. Out. In. Out.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Wildly Capable with Kate. I'm joined today by my boyfriend, Bobby.
Yes.
Or as many of you know him as Bob Bay.
Every time you say it like that, I think of when we first started dating, how all of your friends would ask you, like, who's this Bob A guy?
I said I met this guy named Bob Bay last night, and that's what I called him for a while. But Bobby is joining me today because we are going to talk about repairing relationships. For those of you who don't know, Bobby and I have been dating for about 2 years now. Over 2 years?
We met in March, which is next month, so that'll be 2 years.
Okay, almost 2 years. And at one point in our relationship, about a year in, we went through a 2-month breakup. So we broke up, we had no contact, and then we ended up getting back together and had a really intense period of repair during that time that we want to share with all of you and share how we repaired, what that looked like for us, the things that we found that did and did not work for us, and the practices that we still have today to make our relationship what it is. And just to give everybody a little preview, we met in Los Angeles and we now live in Austin, Texas together with our 2 dogs. So clearly repair is possible and you may hear them walking around. So sorry about that. All right.
Let's just say you're natural at this. Just sitting here watching you. I know this is, I think, probably technically the 5th episode going out, but this is like easy for you, babe.
Thank you. It is the many years of TV hosting and training that I went through.
Yeah.
It helps.
I'm very excited for this.
I'm
This
too.
is going to be a good conversation. Buckle up to people that are listening or watching.
And for anybody who doesn't follow us on Instagram, we actually asked our audiences 4 questions to help us with this conversation. So anything they were wondering about why we broke up, how we repaired, things like that, we have a few questions that we're going to answer. But before we do that, Bobby, do you just want to kind of set the scene for kind of our relationship and give a little backstory as to what we went through?
Yeah, sure. Put me on the spot. I got no context of what we were doing in this conversation. So, boom. Yeah, so we met March 2021, right? So I get the years mixed up now. It was 2022. And then we hit it off pretty quickly, I'd say. 3 months later, I went to visit you in New York. We were then officially boyfriend and girlfriend. Then we spent the next 4 or 5 months like dating and working. I mean, you were the first girlfriend I honestly would say I'd ever really had, because before that it was in high school, right? And like, we're young, and just looking back on that, it's just, I laugh at it. And then it would have been, November of that year, we went through a breakup, which was my decision. And that's a whole nother conversation to unpack there. But it was, at the time, terrible process for both of us. And then through, I'd say, like all of last year, we really committed to focusing on the relationship, which in turn forced both of us to focus on ourselves. And I'll never forget, there was somebody, and I won't say their name, I had hit up when we were like, I don't know if we had started rebuilding together. I think it was really early when we were starting to rebuild, but I asked this individual who I had outside looking in thought had a really good relationship, healthy relationship. And I'll never forget, he said to me, if there are past traumas for either of you in a relationship coming up, that's a sign and an opportunity for you guys to work on them and grow through them together. And I was like, my man, this is what I needed to know, because my avoidant ass wanted to run, and I just didn't have the tools or mindsets or experience of how to like sit and be and lean in when it got really uncomfortable. So, fast forward, we worked all last year. Now we live in Austin. We're shooting this in our kitchen. We have our dogs looking at us. They're sleeping, and it's crazy to think how much has changed in just a year alone, 12 months.
It is crazy. And I always tell people, like new people we meet or any of my dating, relationship, and self-worth clients that I take on, I tell them, our breakup was probably the best thing that could have happened for our relationship. And that sounds so crazy to say, but I genuinely don't believe that we would be here building this life together if we didn't go through those hard moments, because those hard moments taught us so much about not only the relationship, but about ourselves as individuals.
Yeah.
So I learned a ton about you through that experience. You learned a ton about me. And then we learned together how to work through our differences and our traumas and all the things that were coming up that we didn't really like, but had to address in order to be together. And because of that, we built such a stronger relationship than what we had before. I mean, we had a great relationship. It was a healthy relationship prior to the breakup. It was so much fun, but it was nowhere near as strong as it is now. I consider you my safe space and a person I can always count on for any emotion or any season or anything I'm going through. And I don't think I would be able to say that if it wasn't for that hard period.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. It's really, it's emotional to think about what that experience was like for both of us. And even last night we got into a conversation about something. And I think sitting on it, it was like, I think this was all connecting back to somehow, some way, the breakup. And, in it, it was so difficult to work through, but through that process, like, I just feel like what you just said, like, we wouldn't have developed the relationship that we have. And I don't think we both would be living in Austin. I think you would have made the move. I don't even know if you would have came to Austin, you might end up in a different city. So Steve Jobs always said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And I wish that breakup or that process or that energy or experience on anyone, but I've been able to, and I know you have been able to, like, look back on it and have, as weird as this to say, is gratitude. For me, for quite a while last year was just shame on myself on that experience, because I knew that I was the decision maker and caused that to happen. But I'm not proud of what I did or like how I handled myself in allowing the breakup to happen, but I just see it in such a different lens now. So that's why when you said I want to do this podcast, I said, let's buckle up, let's do it.
Do you think you would be the man that you are today if it wasn't for that experience?
I mean, it's just, no, it forced growth faster, sooner. I think I was on that path to do a lot of that type of work, but it wouldn't have felt this like healthy pressure to do it now. Right. And even the timing of us having this conversation with the stuff that I had put out last week, that stems back to doing the growth, right? Which was a very personal thing to like share with the public. So
do you want to share just a little bit?
Yeah, essentially, through the process of us going through the breakup led to me getting my own therapist, which was an incredible experience, emotional on a weekly basis. But through that process, we were diving into so much of childhood and like understanding why I was who I was. And ultimately what came up was discovering a sexual trauma that I had hidden for nearly 17 years of my life that only a handful of people had ever known about. And I leaned into it. I worked through her with it. Then I brought it to you. A few months later, when I was in person with my parents, I brought it to them. My sister had already known. I had kind of told her about it 2 years prior. And then over the next, 6 or 7 months, I kind of sat with it, knowing that one day I wanted to put it out there to the world and end up recording a podcast and sharing it. And so I have peace and freedom letting that out of me, but I don't believe I would have rediscovered it had it not been through the therapy work. So yeah, I mean, to go back to the original question, like I would have someday gotten to that mend work that I know I so badly needed, but I don't know when it would have come because it just would have been delayed and pushed off further and further.
And that's something, you guys, that I love so much about Bobby is he is always willing to do the hard work. He is always willing to take a look at himself and hold himself accountable and call himself to be better and allow me to challenge him to be better. And if either of us had been different people than who we are, that repair process either wouldn't have happened or would have been a million times harder.
Yeah.
But that to say, if you are in a season where you are repairing with somebody, both people have to be willing to put in the work equally. So Bobby had to do his work. I had to do mine. For me, it was getting a trauma and relationship coach who just really walked me through the breakup. I was really struggling with the breakup. She walked me through that And she also just helped me go back into my own childhood and my own abandonment issues and attachment style struggles, so many things that she helped me with. And for Bobby, it looked like getting a therapist, reading certain books, listening to any podcast I threw his way, reading any article I threw his way. It was a lot
of TikToks too.
A lot of TikToks.
Yeah.
But
couples therapy.
We did do couples counseling too. And we wouldn't have grown or mended if it wasn't for both of us being willing to do that. So if you're listening to this and you are in a state where you want to get back together with somebody or you want to make the relationship better, know that it will take both people. So you need a partner who is willing to examine themselves while also holding you accountable and helping you be better too.
What do you say to people that, I think what worked to our advantage then was we were both very self-improvement people, where like you were already on a path of like really auditing your environment, who you hung out with, like you were already on that path. And so was I. So I think it was easier for us to say like, I'll do the therapy. You're going to do a trauma coach. Let's do couples therapy. Like, I think they were still like, wow, we're actually doing this, but we still fall through on it. I think a lot of people will hesitate at falling through on it because maybe they think like, well, if I need that, there's a bigger problem. Or so what do you say to someone that might not be so open-minded to trying services like that?
Great question. I mean, half the battle is getting somebody to be open to doing that sort of work. That work, it's not easy, and not everybody is ready to do it. And sometimes them not being ready to do it, that's okay. You know, with trauma, especially, you don't want to work through that trauma. You don't want to like rehash it and process it unless you're in a safe place in your body and in your environment and in the time and space in your life for you to be able to go back into those things. Because especially with trauma, if it is, you know, it's very intense, it's very hard to work through. So sometimes not being ready, that's actually the space you should be in. Until you are in a safer environment or you have a better support system or you have more tools to handle your emotions and work through the hard emotions, especially when you get those things, then maybe you're ready. So not everybody has to be ready. However, for the people who maybe that doesn't apply to, but they're just very resistant to growth and they're very resistant to looking at themselves and holding themselves accountable and doing the work, and you are dating somebody like that or you're married to somebody like that, my best advice is to just continue to encourage them and tell them like, hey, this is what I did and how it's changed my life. Just be a light for them and be an example for them so they can see, oh my gosh, Bobby's life changed so much. Oh my gosh, Kate's life changed so much. What did she do? What on earth was happening that helped her progress so much? And then slowly but surely, they're going to start making those changes too without them even realizing that they're getting that inspiration from you. So encouraging. I would also say be patient. Something that I really struggle with is being patient with my loved ones when it comes to their growth. I really want it to click and I want them to get it and I want to see the growth and I want our relationship to improve, but sometimes they're just not there. So I get impatient and that pushes them even further away from the work. So just being patient and loving as you're encouraging them. And then a little bit different from what I just said is don't enable them. So if you are with somebody who won't do this hard work, who refuses to play their part in the relationship, don't be the one who's booking their therapy sessions. Don't be the one who's over explaining things to them. All you're doing in that circumstance is enabling them to not do the work for themselves. They have to get to a place where they are willing to take on that responsibility and do it for themselves, because people just, you know, you and I and everybody else, we don't change as much for somebody else as we will for ourselves. So the decision has to be made for you and for you alone. And then that growth can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't force someone to do something they don't want to do.
Yeah.
You have to be open-minded to it.
Pretty impossible.
Yeah. I think it's pretty crazy where we're sitting presently, in the sense like, I don't think 99% of people honestly would have made it through what we made it through. But the beauty of that, especially you being willing to like create this platform now and start sharing, is that all it takes is one example for people to have hope. And that's, you know, I think back in my life, like all I've ever needed was, it worked for them, or in any context, business, personal experience, whatever. So I think it's beautiful that you're creating a space for these types of conversations, because all it takes is one example like this, and it could give someone who's listening like confidence that maybe this could actually work for themselves with
Thank
the
you.
relationship they're in.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And it is true, obviously the divorce rate is really high. You see people breaking up all the time, relationships that are really hard. And my clients will come to me and say, what hope is there? Everybody's getting divorced. My parents are divorced. I'm going through a breakup. Like, there's no hope. That's just what it is nowadays. Relationships are too hard. And that's not true. The reality is that relationships are the same as they've always been. It's just we don't have the tools that we need to work through the hard things. So we get stuck in this mindset of relationships are supposed to be easy and beautiful, and we're not supposed to fight. And if we do fight, then it's not worth it. We need to break up. We need to find somebody better. But the right relationship is a relationship where two people work together and they are imperfect humans coming together to do that work. There will never be a perfect relationship. There will never be two people who are perfect meeting each other in relationship. It's holding space for each other to grow, holding yourself accountable to grow, and gaining the tools and the awareness that you need to be able to do that.
Yeah. One thing you said to me right when we were starting to rebuild was, and I'll never forget it, I was like, damn, she's probably right. And ladies and gentlemen, dating a relationship coach who's like involved in dating and all capacities relationship is you go through the process of, wait, she's the expert, or wait, am I just caving because I know she, like, it's more times than not, you are right. But I remember you had said something to me along the lines of, regardless of if you want to rebuild me or not, you will have to work on this in your next relationship. And it was like a stinger. I was like, the avoidant in me that wanted to just run away assumed that that's freedom, and that I just need to like step away and it all disappears. And in reality, it won't. That inevitably things will come up in another relationship. So I also think, going back to what you said, which like divorce rates high, people, go from one relationship to the next. If you're willing to sit in the discomfort of that work, it's through that process that you're going to come out on the other side. But you have to commit to yourself that you're willing to do that work.
Yeah, exactly. Because no matter what, in any relationship, you will still be the common denominator. So if you have not worked through your stuff, if you haven't shed your old patterns and self-limiting beliefs and healed your traumas, you will carry them into the next relationship. And you'll either have the same problems that you did with the person before, or a different set of problems, but the problems will still be there. And even if you have done that work and you're in a great, healthy relationship, the problems will still be there.
Yeah.
So no matter what, you need the tools and you need the healing.
I also want to add another credit to you around that same time of that conversation. There was one conversation that we had where I finally was able to just like check my ego at the door and just listen to what you were saying, like for black and white, and being unattached to the things you were saying were about me. And when I did that, I could actually hear you clearly, instead of just this immediate defensive mode of, she's wrong about that. Well, that's not true. Like, and that was also another, like, for me, another moment of recognizing, she's right. There's work to do on my end on that. And I think that was also a huge shift in my mindset of, this relationship isn't supposed to work, to, there is room to be worked on. So that was really important.
Thank you. I'm glad that, that had that impact on you. And for people who don't know me or don't know our breakup story, what he's talking about is, so Bobby chose to end the relationship. And for 2 months, I was in this mindset of, no, this ended prematurely. This didn't need to end. The reason it ended was a fight that we could have worked through. It wasn't a deal breaker. It was something that we could come out of together and we could mend. But I couldn't get Bobby to see that. I have a lot more relationship experience. I'm a relationship coach. So I could just see, how my patterns were affecting things. I could see how his patterns were affecting things and how we can move forward through them. So for about 2 months, I spent my time trying to convince Bobby that I was right and trying to convince Bobby to see the things that I was seeing. But the only way he actually did understand and see the things that I was seeing was when I finally stood up for myself and I said, hey, you know what? Like, I think this relationship can work. I don't want this breakup, but I love myself too much to allow you to keep me in this loop or to not choose me. I choose myself. So I need you to leave. And I told Bobby he needs to leave my apartment. We were having a conversation that night. I told him he needed to get out, and he left. And then very shortly after that, he contacted me saying he wanted to repair. So it took me respecting myself and loving myself to kind of like flip that switch and get him to wake up in a way.
Mm.
Does that sound true?
Yeah, it sounds true. I got nothing else to say after that.
Should we get into the questions?
Yeah, this is great. That
submitted?
was so unplanned, and this is the beauty of podcasting and why I love it. You just don't know where you're going to end up, and I think it's just beautiful. So I know I originally had you write down the names, and then out of respect, now that I'm thinking about it, because some of these questions could be from people that are like,
that's a good point,
trying to solve these things themselves, and I don't want to put anyone on the spotlight. So we have 4 questions, and let's kick things off. How do you solve your inner traumas when they come up or out in a relationship?
So I shared a little bit about what worked for us. For me, it was coaching. I have done therapy on and off since I was, 24-ish. So therapy was great. It was a great foundation for me to heal my traumas and work through my traumas. But for me, it was really coaching that kind of was the kicker that made the real shift for me, because I had somebody who was calling me out and who was giving me a different perspective. And therapy is great because you learn so much about yourself. You learn so much about your traumas. And I could write a book about my traumas at this point, but I never had any action items. I never had any steps for how to then heal those traumas. It was okay, cool. This, and this happened. I understand how it's affecting me now. But now what? The behavior isn't changing, even though I completely understand why that behavior exists. So when I got a coach and she pointed things out to me, she held me accountable, she called me out when I wasn't being my best self, that's when shifts started to actually happen, which is why I am a coach now, because it was so impactful for me.
Yeah.
So therapy, coaching, there's so many different health practices that you can incorporate into your life: meditation, mindfulness, healing your inner child, shadow work, listening to podcasts, reading books. There's so many things. Those are the things that work the best for me.
I'd say the therapist, was the most important thing for me. And through that, what you just said, which was like calling out shadows that either had been hidden within me, or honestly, a big one for me was just understanding why I was today based on not necessarily the environment I was raised, like, yes, the household I was raised in, but also just these little things along the way that I don't realize I'm observing and seeing, and then subconsciously telling myself like those are the way things are supposed to be. So it was really just the therapy work of unpacking my childhood and even things that were happening in college that had such a profound impact on me in those moments that I kind of had just like buried. And once again, it's a common theme, burying things. And so, yeah, it just allowed me to sit with these experiences and moments and like redefine how I felt about them, or learning how to like let them go. It was huge. Yeah, it was really good.
And that's what it is half the time, right? Like there are things in our past and in our lives that wound us and that hurt us and that traumatize and affect us. And a lot of times we don't deal with them, or we don't know how to deal with them. And we deal with them in more damaging ways by drinking, returning to unhealthy relationships or drugs, or masking it in some sort of travel or other sort of thing, just masking what we're really feeling deep down. So we never actually feel the feelings that came up with that hurtful experience. And then it comes out time and time again in similar experiences that our brain is equating to that first experience, but we don't even realize it. So we have to process all the things. We have to work through those emotions. We have to allow the emotions to actually come out, because if we don't, they will keep doing so until we finally pay attention to them.
Yeah, I completely agree. Move on to the next one.
Yeah.
How did you build back trust? You want to kick that one off?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that one's that's a tough one. And especially I think in our experience, there were a couple of flags of how the trust was being broken, but the biggest flag was, can I trust you to not leave me? And the hardest truth about that is it just takes time, and it takes following through on your actions and just being very mindful of recognizing what you needed, or what were those moments or things that I could do that would validate the trust was there and was being rebuilt. But once again, you had sent me a podcast early on, which I forget the name of the show, who it was, but it was essentially like trust takes time. And there were times that I was getting frustrated with you because I was like, how can you not trust me yet? Like, it's been 3 months or it's been 5 months. And once again, that was me internalizing how I was feeling and not recognizing that I was the one who broke the trust. But then also, I just needed to respect you needed time and to process it. And I couldn't create a timeline, even though I had this timeline in my mind that it's 3 months. You should be like, I was living by a timeline in my mind, but I shouldn't have done that. So I think that was the biggest thing, was understanding it's going to take patience and time to rebuild it.
Yeah, that's really good. Everybody, I'm going to pause really quickly to let our dogs outside because they are sitting at the door and they're about to bark.
Oh, look at the cozy girls.
I gotta go outside.
We'll come right back in.
Okay, and to answer the same question, just the different perspective. So being the person whose trust was broken, it is exactly what you said. My timeline was all over the place. There were times where I felt safe with you and secure with you, and then something would remind me of the breakup and I would go right back to not feeling that way. And it would kind of go up and down. It was a roller coaster. So for me, definitely time and grace on myself, not trying to force myself to be a-okay with everything that happened when I just wasn't yet, allowing myself to, again, process the emotions so that way they don't keep coming up. Just allowing the timeline to be whatever it was and to not hold myself to a specific timeline, and to give myself grace in the moments where I felt so frustrated with my progress or so frustrated with having to even feel that way in the first place, just allowing myself to actually feel it and not push it down. That was big. And then, asking you when I needed reassurance. So there were, and still are, many times where I have to be like, hey, what is this? Or can you just reassure me right now that you love me, or reassure me that you're not going to leave after this fight? That was a big thing for both of us. For me, in a fight, my default is to fight more and to try to fix the issue and not give any space and to just work through it. Your default is to leave and to run away and be more avoidant. So Bobby has a avoidant attachment style. I have an anxious one. And that's just kind of how it goes. Those two attachment styles find each other all the time, and then they learn how to work through things together. They are each other's mirror. So the biggest thing was learning how to meet each other in the middle, so that way we both felt safe. And so we both were able to trust each other when new conflicts arise, because new conflicts did come up. When we moved here, there's a whole new set of skills that we had to learn with each other, how to live together. So just working with each other to build that trust in conflict, that was really huge. Of now you can trust me, at least hopefully I'm better at it. I think I'm better at it, to give you the space you need to process and to cool down. And then I can trust you to not take space in a way that hurts me, but to take healthy space and then return to the conversation when you're ready so we can work through things.
Yeah. I want to double click on the anxious versus avoidant attachment style, because I'm proud of myself because I have truly come a long way.
Yeah, you have.
And I share that because I want people to recognize that they can change in the sense of like, there is that middle. There's that middle where you compromise and you meet your partner halfway, so that if you were the avoidant like me and you were the anxious, like we had tested like 20-minute, separations or an hour separation. And we did a lot of different tactics to try to figure out what works best for us. And then, there have been recent small little conflicts where we take our space, and then I'm like, Bobby, you either address this now or you're just going to let it melt in the back of your mind, knowing that this conversation has to happen. So I have now chosen, like, I'm going to do this now. And that was something that I had pulled from that Chris Williamson event that I went to. The whole theme of the show was close the loop. Like, I want to go to the gym. It's 10 a.m. now, I'll go later. And you're just constantly thinking about the thing all day long. And as for us, example, it's like, I got to have a tough conversation with Kate. I'm just going to hold off on it. No, close the loop, go do the thing. So you can learn. It takes time and effort, but damn it. I was thinking about that the other day because I came to you about something and I was like, yeah, that's right, Bobby. You've learned, baby.
Well, it's true. You really have grown so much. And I know it's uncomfortable for you, but you've learned how to lean into that discomfort. It used to be, I would know something was upsetting Bobby and I would ask him, what's wrong? What's wrong? I can tell your energy shifted. What is wrong? Tell me. And he wouldn't, or he wasn't able to until a week later, or me asking a zillion more times. Now it's, this upset me. This is why. Here's what I would like to see happen.
Yeah.
And he's great at it. And I have to, in reverse, also kind of fight myself and close the loop too, because my instinct is, well, screw you. You know, you already shut down. So I'm out. Like, you're the worst. And I want to like roll my eyes and walk away. And sometimes I do that, but then I have to catch myself and fight myself in return and say, okay, what I just did, that's an old pattern, but I can choose a new pattern. And I go back and I say, okay, let's repair. Let's do it. This is actually an exact example that happened about 4 days ago. So it's fresh on both of our minds. And the thing is, neither of us are perfect at it. You know, I still revert back to those old patterns sometimes, and Bobby does too. And it's just learning each other's styles and what each other needs. So that way, you know, that gap can get closed more and more every time, but allowing each other to be imperfect, because we're just never going to be 100% aligned and perfect with each other.
Yeah. I think a big shift too is removing you statements and more like owning I.
Yeah.
So that has also been a big shift where maybe there's moments when I would communicate, well, you did this and it hurts, like blah, 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 where instead I think about, I feel blank when this happens. So it's taking ownership that you can't control how I feel. I can only control how I feel. And it just allows the communication to be so much more fluid instead of like, you did this, you did that, you did that. Well, you're coming at your partner saying all the things that they did wrong, but you're actually not even getting to the most important thing, which is how do you actually feel? And approaching it from that lens has been so much more freeing and allows actually an opportunity for the relationship to grow.
Absolutely. So learning each other, that was a big way that we built trust, and being patient and understanding with each other.
Yeah. Next one.
Yes.
This is a spicy conversation. No idea where this convo was going to go, but
Bobby goes from not having a girlfriend for 10 years to dating me, moving in with me, and then doing podcasts about relationships with me. What a roller coaster. Sorry, Bob.
Unbelievable. Suburb Bob, baby. All right. This one you're going to kick off. What was, well, it's up to you if you want to kick off, or I can. What was the reason for the breakup?
We shared a little bit at the start, but really it was just our old wounds. So Bobby was conditioned to run away and shut down in conflict, and I was conditioned to push harder. And if I didn't have closeness, I would freak out. I couldn't sit with any sort of conflict. I had to fix it right then and there, which a lot of times turned into even more intense fights. So we had just one instance where we were having a disagreement over the phone, and Bobby reverted to his old pattern. I reverted to my old pattern. They clashed completely. And because we didn't have the tools or understanding with each other at that time, it led to a breakup.
Yeah. I'd say two things about that moment. One is and this is something I've learned with being in a relationship, because clearly I was not equipped before that. I remember in that conversation, what's internally happening in my mind is my freedom is being pulled. And like, it's not wrong for that to come up within me because I can't control it, but it was wrong for the way in which I responded, which is, hey, I'm out. Like, this isn't working. I feel like my freedom is being taken, whatever. And what I've learned through that is you're in a relationship for a reason, and you can't, to actually expect you have this massive freedom to do whatever you want, go like whatever freedom means to you. The whole point of being in the relationship is compromise. And so that was one thing that came up, was the freedom, but in reality, there should be a compromise in the relationship in a healthy way. And then secondly was communication. And once again, I was shutting down, and I just was like avoidant and like, this is not working. But had I actually allowed myself to recognize, wait, how are you feeling? Pause, give Kate space, then revisit, allow each other the space to breathe, so then you can recommunicate. So those are two things that came up.
And for everybody who resonates with what Bobby said about a relationship taking away your freedom, first of all, that is so common and it's such a valid thing to feel. Like you said, that's not a bad thing to feel. But I want you guys to know that when you are in a healthy relationship where there is so much respect, that freedom that you will gain through that mutual respect and love is unlike any freedom that you'll have as just a free bird individual single person, in my opinion. You find a safe space and you find a security and a home in another person. And that gives you the freedom to explore who you truly are. That gives you the freedom to explore your traumas, to explore your interests, to explore your passions, to explore your own personality like you weren't able to before, because now you have this person who's there saying, hey, I'm going to catch you every single time and I'm going to cheer you on every single time. You're safe to do all of that with me. You are safe to be free in yourself with me.
What was that when we first moved in together here? You had said you were, which is a healthy thing to do. And I feel like I was doing it without realizing it. You were mourning my
singlehood.
Yeah. And that was something that I've thought about too. And we've communicated, like, it's so easy to just live cohesively together and like end the day together. But then there have been times where we've chatted about like, how do we separate and give ourselves time and space? But that's something that I think more people need to talk about, is like, it's not a bad thing that you're like that you lose certain things when you're, of being single, waking up and having no responsibility, or like, you just move through the day and you just do what you need to do and you don't have to worry about anything else. But when you find that right partner, it just brings another level of, I would say, purpose to your life. And you won't know it until you get there. Cause I was even talking to somebody, I forget who it was recently, where that was their biggest thing, was like, I don't know, like, I feel like if I get into a relationship with someone, it's just going to distract me. And then I'm like, I get it. Cause I used to think that same way. And that's what led me to just this toxic work life. And there's no regrets. I wouldn't be who I am today. But I said, now knowing what I know now, when you find that right partner, the other side of it is, there's no question about it. Like, you're not going to want to trade your singlehood, because it depends on what you want out of life. If you want to like really build with someone and have, like something like we have, which is like exciting and inspiring, and, I'm just very grateful for it. But, there's something to be said about mourning your singlehood.
It's a very real thing. And I would say, when you are in the wrong relationship, it will be a distraction. It will hold you back. When you're in the right relationship, a healthy relationship, it will progress you in ways that you couldn't have on your own. So if you're in an unhealthy relationship, totally, it will take away from your career. It will take away from your life vitality. I'm with Bobby, somebody who encourages me and cheers me on and pushes me to be better. And in the time span of dating Bobby, I've started my own business. I have quit my full-time job, which was very toxic and unhealthy. I'm working for myself full-time as an entrepreneur. And I just launched a podcast. That's happening. I launched it today, and we're now recording a future episode. So with the right person, you will actually have the foundation to do so much more. And I think that's such a common misconception, especially for men. Honestly, they get very worried that being with somebody, being in a relationship, will take away from their career and the business and whatever they're starting. But really, if you find a good woman, if you find a good partner, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you credit. It has forced me to be more intentional. I think the recent example, I was chatting with someone on a podcast, was I used to be very wide in the sense of just like, I'm a natural people's person. I like meeting a lot of people, and like, I've always found enjoyment in that. But when it came to depth, there was only, a handful. And I think that was something I really respected about you, which was like, you were so intentional, have always been like, you'd rather have 5 really true core friends than 20 like surface level. And so that has inspired me and changed the dynamic of my friendships. It just has changed the dynamic in a better way. And also what you had said, which is like, maybe the men, and maybe there's women out there that think this way too. It's like, well, I'm going to be not as focused. It honestly just forces you to be you get the same amount of work done in the week, just in a less amount of time, because you actually have this healthy pressure to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have to be so much more intentional with like, what are you saying yes to? Because you have someone that like is your, I don't want to say true north,
Mm-hmm.
because that's like me, that's saying that they like, you put them on a pedestal and like, it's
Right.
whatever they want. But like they are a compass for you of like, if I say yes to this, I'm saying no to time with Kate.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes like this yin and yang of like, is this worth my time? Do I want to actually say yes to this? What is the actual cost? So, you know, it's one thing to come from Bobby Hober and you guys might be like, okay, like, I'm sure you're right. But Alex Hormozy hits on this so heavily and he gives Layla, his wife, so many flowers. And I love that he does that because I don't see any other entrepreneur at his level doing it. Giving the flowers and putting her so much in the front of, if I didn't have her, I wouldn't have built this business.
Right.
And we don't need to go through my running achievements, but I'd for sure, like if I look back on the last 18 months of my life, some of the biggest positive identity shifts, career growth, leaving my full-time gig, just so many exciting things. And you were a role in letting those things actually come to fruition. So
yeah,
thank you.
Of course. Thank you. It's beautiful.
Yes.
Do we have any other questions?
We have one more.
Okay.
I wish there was like 15 more. I keep going. I'll let you kick this one off because you didn't really have the last one. How to respect each other. Again, ? Fights are horrible.
So this person actually asked a couple questions, just really focused on how do I regain attraction and respect for my partner when we are fighting? So to this specific person, I want to say that first, before you focus on rebuilding, before you focus on rebuilding respect, attraction, trust, whatever it is, you need to get the fights to calm. You two cannot repair if you are both so heightened and you're in this state of just being at each other's throats. So there needs to be some sort of maybe a pause, maybe a boundary that you have to set, whatever it is, for those fights to subside. And then you can come back together and say, okay, you know, this is what's lacking for me. This is what I need. This is what's not working. How can we work together to heal those things? So first and foremost, there needs to be something's got to give with those fights. There needs to be a period of calm so you both can recover a little bit emotionally. And then rebuilding respect in a relationship. It's the same thing. You know, there have been times where I've lost respect for Bobby and he's lost respect for me. And we had to forgive each other, first of all. But the only way we were able to forgive each other is when we held ourselves accountable. So when Bobby would say, hey, I recognize that I did this, and that's the reason that you can't trust me or you're not respecting me as much right now, or there's been a respect loss. I take accountability for that. I see what I did. Here's what I'm doing to change those things. So we both had to take accountability for ourselves in order for the other person to say, oh my gosh, I really respect that. You know, he maybe made a mistake or did something hurtful, but he's willing to change it and she's willing to grow. So each person needs to take accountability for their faults in the relationship and then tell each other, and this is what I'm going to do to change those things. Off the top of my head, that's what I would say.
Yeah. For the fights part, I don't remember what podcast it was, but the expert said that if your heart rate exceeds 140 beats per minute in a fight, you need to like separate because like nothing will actually be solved. Now, none of us have like a monitor on us to measure that, but in reality, like for perspective, like that's essentially, as someone who runs and measures my heart rate, 140 is really not that. It's a substantial amount of like heartbeat where all that to say, we are definitely arguing individuals when we shouldn't be. So I think being mindful of asking yourself, like, is my heart rate really bumping right now? It's probably a good sign of like, I should not engage in this fight. And then one thing that we had tried and we kind of steered away from it because I feel like we just learned how to allow each other to speak, which was like having like a talking stick and not coming at each other was like, okay, if you have the stick, you're allowed to talk, and me wanting to interrupt you. But I think ultimately we had to find that balance of like recognizing we need time and space to just let things settle before even attempting repair, because the screaming and bantering back and forth just will not resolve anything and is only going to dig you into a deeper hole. And I challenge those that tend to be the one, which I've been before, which is like, I'm going to let them repair. I'm going to let them engage in the conversation first. Just be, I don't want to say the bigger person because that's not the right way, but like be the one that steps up to the plate to engage in, are you ready to have a conversation?
Yeah. Be the one who breaks the silence or the tension first, which can be very, very challenging to do, but it's very, very rewarding when you do it.
Yeah. It's challenging, but it's also like, it's on your mind. You know, the conversation needs to happen. So the loop is open. We need to talk, but when? I'm going to push it off. Now it's 3 days. Like,
right.
Just close the damn loop, have the conversation, be in the discomfort. And then 3, you're like, wow, this feels great. It's like off my chest now.
Well, and it's an ego thing, right? You don't want to be the first person to say sorry, the first person to break the silence. That comes from our ego. And it also comes from our old wounds of, I was given the silent treatment. From my parents or a past relationship. So I have learned how to withdraw and how to protect myself. There are so many different protection mechanisms that we take on that can prevent us from being able to be that person who closes the loop first. But you kind of have to fight yourself. That's what I tell all my clients, with any old pattern and old behavior that is not working for you anymore, that's damaging yourself and your relationships. You have to literally fight yourself and challenge yourself and say, hey, Kate, I can see you're getting anxious right now because Bobby's out at dinner at 9 p.m. and you're worried that something's happening. Instead of jumping to conclusions, instead of checking his location, instead of calling him a bunch, why don't you just sit back and process that for a second? Just be with yourself for a second and say, oh, hey, I see this is hurting. This doesn't feel very good to you right now, but I'm here and you're safe and you don't have to react the same way that you have in the past. So that can apply to anything. That can apply to being the person who says sorry first. Sit back and say, hey, you're used to not being the one who says sorry first because your ego is in the way. How about we just try something different right now? So you challenge yourself and you do it more and more every time. And eventually it will become more second nature and more a part of your routine and your character and who you are. So you kind of got to, fight your own brain a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. That was it. That was the last question.
That was it. So you guys, if you learned anything from this conversation, if you have any other questions for us, please leave us a DM. Please comment on this. Please let us know your thoughts. Bobby, where can people find you?
Where do you guys want to find me? As her friends would say, how's Bobby doing? BO 3 B's 4 A's and a Y on all socials. You can find me. I'm sure Kate will have me tagged up somewhere on this podcast.
It's such a mouthful. I love it.
Yeah.
And then for me, you can follow me at Coach Kate DeRocher. And then this is a Wildly Capable podcast. New episodes are coming out every Tuesday. And I cannot wait to keep exploring these in-depth conversations and topics with all of you. Thank you, Bobby, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I do have one request. If you are listening to this podcast, that means you value Kate, her show, and especially in the early stages of launching a podcast, it is so important for people to take 30 seconds to leave a review. There's so much time and energy that gets put into creating an episode like this. Like, we literally transformed our kitchen into a bootstrap studio right now. And, it's just really important. So if you are enjoying these episodes, if you're listening on Spotify, hit the follow button, leave a review. If you're on iTunes, do the same. If you're on YouTube, comment on it. Like, all those things really go a long way. So please actually do that if you enjoyed this conversation or any of the podcasts.
Thank you. I need to get better at promoting myself. I appreciate it. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will see you here next time on Wildly Capable with Kate.